Governor, you mentioned the coronavirus a little earlier. What's being done to prepare on the economic front of this? I know the whole nation is feeling it right now, actually the whole globe. What's being done statewide on the economic front to brace against any backlash there?
Well, you know, the question is, what are we doing here in Louisiana to try to lessen the economic impact, the toll that's being taken by coronavirus? Look, that is extremely difficult, and I'll give you one small example of what we're dealing with, and then if you think about this in the context of everywhere else that it could potentially play out. So we know, for example, the Port of New Orleans has ordered 2 cranes that they need down at the port, and they're coming from China. Well, we now know that there will be a delay in receiving those cranes because the work isn't progressing as it had before. And I'll mention this second example because I think it's important too. We have had a run on masks, surgical masks. And by the way, the Surgeon General of the United States and our own Office of Public Health says you're not going to do yourself any good by going out there and getting the mask. So, but go on eBay and buy them if you want to, but they're going to be very, very expensive. But not only has there been a run on them, but most of those masks are produced in China, and even if they're assembled in Louisiana, in the United States, the materials typically come from over there. So it's very difficult at the state level to do things to try to prepare for or minimize the impact. I think what we can do to minimize the impact of novel coronavirus is to make sure we do all the things that I mentioned before, so that it doesn't spread more than it should or would if we followed all these precautions, and then not to engage in panic or hysteria, but be driven by the facts as it relates to coronavirus. And if we do that, we'll get past this sooner than later, and hopefully without it getting as severe as I know some people have indicated that it might. It is still the truth that far more people have died this year from the flu than from coronavirus, and every year from the flu. This is new, and so it's cause for concern. It is not cause for panic. Yes, ma'am.
Should we be concerned that there aren't enough testing kits and things available?
Yeah.
That's what we're hearing from across the country.
Well, I'm going to repeat the questions, but the question is whether we should be concerned that we don't have enough testing capacity. That is not a concern that we have at present. One of the things I just spoke with the Vice President and his team about, including Secretary Azar and others on the phone call, is they're ramping up additional capacity for testing very, very quickly. So we don't anticipate that this is going to be a problem. Right now, we can administer the tests in state. We will get a preliminary finding, whether it's positive or negative. If it's positive, we will call it presumptively positive, because we then send to the CDC and they will either confirm it or not. But once they confirm it, then we have a confirmed positive result. But right now, we don't have an issue with respect to capacity, and we think that this is going to greatly increase going forward. One of the things that we are trying to make sure of is that we have enough lab technicians to make sure that we can process these tests. And this is a swab test is what they're using, by the way. Yes, ma'am.
Governor, let me ask you about the Beth Mizell's and Beryl Amadei's bill that is titled Save Women's Sports. Do you have any commentary on that? It prohibits any transgender individuals from participating in gender-specific sports.
So the question was whether I have any comments about a bill that's been authored by Representative Beryl Amadei and Senator Beth Mizell as it relates to, I think, transgender women's participation in sports. The answer is I do not. There are so many bills that were filed, and we are just now starting the process of going through those, reading those to identify those we support, those we might need to oppose, or where we would recommend that changes be made. But I'm just not prepared. If you looked at the list of pre-filed bills, there are hundreds and hundreds of them, and that process just ended. And by the way, once the session starts, each legislator can file 5 more. So this is not going to get any easier anytime soon. But at some point, we will be ready to talk not just about that bill, but about others as well. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry.
Okay. It's my understanding that you're supposed to have a phone call, or you either have or are supposed to have, with officials from St. Joseph's Academy regarding a group of girls who just returned from Italy who may or may not be being quarantined right now. Does that happen?
I have not had a call with anyone from St. Joseph's about that. When individuals return to the United States, the federal government communicates with us if they are coming from a place where the heightened scrutiny is in order, and testing and that sort of thing. Right now, and this is as of the phone call we were just on, all of Italy is not at issue when it comes to travel. It is a certain region of Italy, in northern Italy, around Milan, in the Lombardy region, I believe. But we haven't had that discussion about these particular young people from St. Joseph's Academy. We have had somewhere around 40 or so overall people that traveled into the state who came from places that caused the federal government to let us know that they were here, all of whom have cooperated with us fully, and they are isolating themselves at home until they get past the 14-day window. They're taking their temperature twice a day and calling in once a day, and that sort of thing. And about half of those individuals have been released from that because they're outside of the window that this would be an issue. But that's, if we have any more information about a specific group, we'll let you know later. But it just hasn't happened with respect to the question you just asked. Yes, ma'am.
2 questions, Jennifer Brocken with WDSU.
I'm going to object for the record. It's a compound question.
I'll separate the sentences.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So the number of Louisiana residents, not just people who've visited through, who are currently under quarantine, maybe even in other parts, and also specifically to New Orleans, we're so dependent on tourism and port activity. Was any part of your conversations today specifically addressing festival season, Jazz Fest, the port, anything constraining any of those?
No, and no activities in New Orleans, no conventions, no festivals. We just got through Mardi Gras last week. None of that has been canceled or curtailed. We haven't had groups cancel any plans or anything like that. I think where you're seeing things canceled, they are in the other countries that are going through this. And so maybe at Korea, certain parts of Italy, and so forth. Now, obviously, there are certain interventions that become wise depending on what happens. And we hope it never gets to the point where we are having to curtail the ability of certain assemblies and that sort of stuff. But we know that this novel coronavirus spreads, because of contact between one human and another, and so forth. I mean, that's just looking so far down the road. No interventions like that are called for at this time. And one of the things that we've been urged to do by the Centers for Disease Control, and again today by the Vice President and Secretary Azar, is not to have unnecessary disruption now from just normal everyday life, because it isn't warranted. And all that would do is needlessly cause people to panic and so forth, and have more disruption upon the economy and so forth than would be warranted under the circumstances.
And then did you have a count of the number of Louisiana residents under quarantine?
What's the question?
The question is how many Louisiana residents under quarantine. I don't believe quarantine is the right word for a single Louisiana resident. We have some that we've asked to isolate themselves in their homes, and I think we're talking about a couple of dozen people at this point. I've got my experts back there shaking his head, so it's about a couple of dozen folks. And by the way, none of whom are even symptomatic at this point. Yes, sir.
Governor, Tulane is one of the first facilities in the country to get CDC approval to study coronavirus. Have they discussed with you the status of the vaccine?
No. I heard someone, and I can't remember who it was, at the President's press conference last week explain the process of developing, testing, mass producing, and making available a new vaccine. And I can't remember where it came out. Even if this is the fastest one that's ever made available, you're still looking at more than a year for that. But I haven't had that particular conversation with folks at Tulane, although I would encourage them to do everything that they can. Yes, sir.
Governor, 4.5 years ago, right behind that podium, you said that Louisiana's $50,000 jury trial threshold was, and I quote, fair, reasonable, and strikes at the right balance, unquote. Are those still your sentiments today?
The question is about the jury trial threshold, which in Louisiana is set at $50,000, has been for a long time. I don't particularly have a problem with the $50,000 jury trial threshold. It is something that I know obviously some people feel differently about, and I'm happy to engage with them in those conversations. Yes?
Governor, I'm wondering what conversations you've had with the incoming legislative leadership, the new House Speaker and the new Senate President. Are you kind of working to get, are there any areas of agreement you've found, or are you talking to them regularly yet? Or
Yeah.
What's the relationship?
All right, so the question is the conversations that I've had with the new Senate President, Paige Cortez, and the new Speaker of the House, Clay Sexsnyder. And I have had several meetings and conversations with each of them, and our personal relationship is just fine, and we're communicating just fine. I am optimistic that we're going to be able to work together to tackle the big challenges that face the state of Louisiana. And you know, my approach for this term will be the same as it was over the last 4 years, when I also was working with a majority Republican House and a majority Republican Senate, although the circumstances were vastly different. We're no longer talking about a $2 billion deficit or fiscal cliffs. We're talking about 3 consecutive surpluses. We're talking about a growing economy that's the largest it's ever been and the 4th fastest growing in the United States of America. And we're talking about continuing the critical investments that we've started again in things like higher education, K through 12, and early childhood. Trying to make sure that we maintain the momentum we have with respect to health care in Louisiana. We have the lowest percentage of people without health insurance today in our history. It is saving the state hundreds of millions of dollars. We haven't lost a single hospital as a result of it, in contrast to states all across the South where hospitals have closed by the dozens. Most importantly, people have access to primary care and preventative care. And you know, I've got this new initiative on rural revitalization. And certainly we have challenges, as does rural America. But one of the challenges we don't have is a bunch of hospitals out there that are closed. Because if you go to a small rural community where you find a hospital, you're typically looking at one of the biggest employers and one of the largest payrolls in the parish. Secondly, if you try to attract people to move to or invest in a community that doesn't have a hospital, good luck. And so these are some of the things that we've actually been doing well, although I acknowledge we do have particular challenges out there. And that's a long answer to a simple question, but I will tell you, I feel very optimistic that we're going to be working together just fine to tackle the biggest challenges that we have as a state and to continue our forward momentum. Yes, ma'am.
Governor, do you have a preference among the 21 candidates who have
No.
submitted their name for the superintendent of education?
Oh.
Democratic presidential?
No, in fact,
You can answer both now. Do you have a preference on the Democratic presidential candidate?
I thought you were talking about the people who want to be governor next, so we'll deal with that later. No, actually, I think that list was finalized late Friday. To be honest with you, I haven't even gone through all 21 names. I do hope we will pick someone who is a champion for education. I want us to pick someone who doesn't need a waiver from the requirements that the legislature set into law to be a superintendent, someone who has spent time in the classroom, someone who has seen education from a variety of perspectives. And I believe that we have multiple candidates who fit that bill, and I would call upon Bessie to proceed in that fashion. Yes, sir, Mr. Hightower.
I know we've had some apparent difficulties in the judiciary in recent months, and there's a lot of bills that are introduced or pre-filed that will affect that. But I'm interested in, maybe too early for you to tell, but do you have a position or feel anything you can tell us about your position on merit selection?
Yeah.
Merit selection of judges?
Yeah, so thank you, Mr. Hightower. He's asking about my position on the merit selection of judges. And when you hear that presented, typically what they'll say is, well, we need to do that and get the politics out of the system. There is no way to get the politics out of the system because it's going to be an elected official who would name those individuals to the judgeships. It's just somebody else's politics rather than the voters. I happen to think that we should trust the voters to decide who the judges are going to be. You know, nobody should be surprised when you have hundreds of members of the judiciary that you're going to have a few who misbehave. Obviously, we don't want that to happen, and we need to guard against it, and we need to make sure that when it happens, it's dealt with swiftly. But I don't believe that there's enough of that to warrant a changing from the current system that we have of electing our judges. I think we can trust the people of Louisiana to make good decisions, and I think they adequately lived up to that this past year when they reelected me. I could tell some people weren't following on that one. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry, over here.
Governor, as you alluded to, you've been pushing for increased minimum wage for quite some time, wanting to end pay secrecy for quite some time. What reason do you have to believe this time could be different?
Well, first of all, we're not going to stop trying until we're successful because we know it's the right thing to do. We also know that overwhelming majorities of Louisianans agree with both of those. So we're not going to stop. And look, it's my hope, my expectation that we will be able to prevail upon those who have not seen fit to support those measures in the past, both legislators and groups like the Louisiana Association of Business and Industry, the National Federation of Independent Businesses, and so forth, just because it's time to do it. It's the right thing to do. And we're going to keep working extremely hard, and hopefully we can find the right way to talk to and convince these people. But I'm encouraging folks all across the state of Louisiana to contact their members of the House and the Senate and talk to them about addressing this gender-based wage gap, addressing the minimum wage. And there's no reason why it can't happen, and especially with so many new members who maybe haven't even formed an opinion on this yet, that it can be done this year. Yes, sir.
Governor, how you doing?
I'm well, thank you.
Good. As you know, I have family and friends and properties on both sides of the Mississippi River. We live in Kansas. My question relates to revised statute 30:51 in its current form, which I've tried and now run for office, public office statewide, twice to try to get, attention drawn to that issue. And look, with respect to the Attorney General, all of these are just allegations, okay? But those allegations, in my view, have highlighted the need to do something about that. And my question to you is, in your view, would anybody that's running for district attorney now, and in my case, they really are Democrats, have pause for concern or heartburn if the legislature doesn't do anything this session to appropriately amend or even repeal revised statute 30:51, and I assure you, your executive council knows the danger of that statute.
It's a question about Louisiana revised statute Title 30, Section 51. And, you know, I don't have a specific response for you today on that. I can tell you, because I know that you prefaced your question with where you live and so forth. I will tell you that we are basically auditing the tumor registry now to ensure its completeness and its accuracy, and that will be a really good indicator of whether there is a heightened issue in the area that you speak of. But you know, I'm not prepared to discuss whether the legislature will see fit to amend or repeal that particular statute. I just don't know today.
My question is, do you think district attorneys will have a problem if they don't?
I don't know the answer to the question, Ike, sorry.
One more?
Yes, sir.
Governor, do you plan to vote in Louisiana's Democratic presidential primary on April 4th? And if so, who are you going to support?
I always vote.
Repeat the question, please.
Okay, the question is whether I will vote in the Democratic primary in Louisiana. The question is yes, and you can ask me later for whom I'll vote, because we don't even know the lineup yet that will be on the ballot here, or those people who will still be in consideration. Look, I think somebody said that. Was that you, Christina?
That was me.
All right. Look, thank y'all for the opportunity to be with you. I look forward to addressing the legislature a week from today, and then working with them over the next 3 months to successfully bring the session to a conclusion with a good budget that allows us to adequately fund our critical priorities and continue moving the state of Louisiana forward.